All right, well, good morning, church. We are in our third series on money. And I want to start by this. How many of you love the word squander? How many of you are good at the word squander? That's it. Yeah, it's my middle name. It's kind of like the other things. Some of us have PhDs in squander. The interesting thing is, any of you ever turn on the TV, and I hate this about our modern society, that infomercials have just taken over. Christy and I were watching the news the other morning, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, they have this little blip of news that comes on for like 30 to 45 seconds, and then there are literally 5 commercials. And then there's another little blip of news for 30 to 45 seconds, and then guess what? 4 commercials. And then a little blip of news, and 5 more commercials. I'm like, what we're watching anymore is what? Commercials. Some of us are old enough, which they still have some on like QVC and other places, called the infomercials. You ever watch those? Infomercials are designed for one reason, and what is that? To sell you something that you really don't need. But if you ever watch an infomercial, you'll realize the people that develop these things are exceedingly smart. I mean, you get into it and you see something on an infomercial and you're like, yeah, why would I need a Snuggie? I mean, seriously, have 2 people, have this big giant bed pillow that I'm going to fit into and look all cute and everything. But you start getting 5-10 minutes into these things and they start telling you why you need a Snuggie and how soft it is and delicate on the skin and how cool you'll look in the family pictures years later and all this stuff. And by about 15 minutes, you know what you start to say? Maybe I need a Snuggie. I'm not going to ask how many of you own them. But if you ever noticed in these infomercials and even modern day commercials, the word squander is never in there. Can you imagine one of the infomercials opening up like this? It'd be kind of like the medical commercials. I hate the medical commercials. By the way, us and New Zealand are the only nations in the world that allow the medical commercials. And you know what happened right after they allowed them? Medical sales went up like crazy. Only 2 nations in the world allow those commercials, and we're one. But anyway, if you watch the medical commercials, they always show, a person, and they're always happy and everything and jolly, and they have friends around them, and it's sunny outside, and the butterflies are going, and some of them they sing and then they dance. And while you're watching this with your eyes, you know what they're rolling at the bottom of the screen? 90,000 words of disclaimers that state, you could die from this, you'll be sick, these are the symptoms, these are the side effects, and you will have diarrhea that will never end, and your eyes will flutter, and your breath will stink. But you know what? We don't see it. You know why? We're watching the pretty happy people in the pretty happy place, and we're going, oh my, I want to be like that. And then at the end it has these famous words, and it says, go and ask your doctor about this. Well, last I remember, when you go to the doctor is supposed to tell us what we need, not us tell the doctor what we need. But the commercials say, go and ask your doctor. And in the United States and New Zealand, once they aired these commercials, you know what people started doing? Going and telling the doctor what they needed. And the doctor was like, all right, you want it, I'll prescribe it for you. But can you imagine that, or one of these infomercials coming on with this at the very beginning? I'm here to give you a 30-minute commercial on how to squander your money. I'm going to invite you to come and waste your money on product A, B, C, and D because it's a grave pit money opportunity. Give us your money. In fact, sign up for free shipping, which is a joke, and we're going to send you 2 of them. It's going to break within 5 minutes. It's not going to look like what's on the commercial. It'll be useless in 3 months. It's not going to work, and you're going to have to spend money to maintain this thing. And when you try and return it, hey, forget getting a hold of our customer service. You're never going to talk to them. Now, come and watch our commercial on how to squander your money. How many of you are still watching? It'd be different if commercials told the truth, wouldn't it? It would be different if on medical commercials they had to put the side effects up in big pictures and play a pretty little picture off in the corner, right? We'd be like, no way. I mean, imagine showing up to an auction or an auto dealer or someone and saying, hey, this thing is really broke, but you know what? I spit shined it, I put a new coat of paint on it, and it looks really good. So it's only worth about $5, but give me 60 and I'll sell it to you. We'd be like, oh, yeah, right? Richard and Ellen tell me stories of when they're down in Arizona with some of the other retired community. There's a lot of yard sales. And Richard laughs, he calls me up, and we'll text back and forth, and he'll be like, hey, I saw like, you know, he goes, if you go to Harbor Freight and you take your coupon in, you get a free gift. He goes, I just went to 3 yard sales where they're trying to sell the free gifts for $7 a piece. He's like, do they not know some of us actually go to Harbor Freight and get the free gifts? He goes, I've got 7 of them in my toolbox, right? You know, but they're trying to sell them. Squandering our money. There are people out there to get you to squander your money like crazy. And some of it is even packaged in a legitimate way. Christy and I had the same homeowners insurance for years. And we kept asking the guy, we're like, hey, our homeowners insurance goes up every year. What's the reason? He's like, well, the economy. And there'd be good years. We're like, hey, the economy's doing good. The interest rate's up. Well, you know, this other section of the economy, it's not doing so good. So we had to raise your rates. Finally, Christy went looking around, and here's the crazy thing for us. This is like a little bad thing on our just doing the same normal behavior over and over again. She found an insurance. Now, there's some limited things to it, but in what we paid for 6 months on our homeowner's insurance covered 1 month from the other guy. And we called him up, or she called him up, sent him a text, said, hey, we're switching insurance. He's like, well, what is it? Maybe I can help you. She's like, this insurance. And he's like, go for it, because he knew. We'd been paying for years for what we thought was good homeowners insurance. And then we started looking around. It's like we were idiots for several years. And finally, a light bulb came off. Thank God, you know. We are good at squandering our money, aren't we? I mean, it starts off as kids, you know. Anybody ever remember buying Cracker Jacks? Okay, what's the real reason you bought the Cracker Jacks? Was it for the food? The toy. Well, then cereal commercials got on the bandwagon, right? Cereal companies say, hey, look at Cracker Jacks, they're geniuses. If we put a toy in the box, guess what? They're gonna. Any of you ever go through the store when you were kids saying, I want that cereal, not because of the cereal, but because of the limited edition toy. I remember I had the secret decoder ring. Woo. You turn the plastic knob and you could decipher things, which I never really figured out how it worked, but I had it. My mom had to buy a $6 box of cereal to get it, but I had it, right? Any of you ever do that? Have grandkids, you buy them stuff just because they asked for it? We are good at squandering the money that we have. Now, we've looked at 2 things so far in our money series. First one is earn your money. Don't freeload. Earn your money. God says there's honor in working and earning. God created work clear back in Genesis before the fall, by the way. It wasn't just at the fall. After the fall came the curse for Adam and Eve with what they had to do. But Adam was called to tend the garden and to name the animals and stuff before the fall. He had to go to work. And when God looked at his creation, he said 3 words. It is good. What he did for Adam was he created him for a purpose, and he gave the man honor in what he was doing. He did the same with the woman in raising children and helping supplement the family, and gave her that place. When we do it right, it's good. It's good. There's a good thing to earning our money. The next thing we looked at was saving our money. We looked at 3 principles from Financial Peace and from other places that God kind of lays out and says, hey, the first 10% is a gift offering back to me. I give you 10 apples, I'm going to ask for 1 back. You okay with that? That's really what it is. And then God encourages, save some money. We looked at saving last week, that God does call us to put away money for specific motivations and reasons. And one is to save for a rainy day or an emergency fund, because the Bible tells us flat out, things will happen, right? There will be emergencies, and that's not having pizza on a Friday night, by the way. I mean, the fridge is going to break down, the car is going to break down, the kid's going to have to go to the hospital, something's going to happen. And God says to save so that you as my people are prepared for that. Save throughout your life. Put some away that you can't get to. I didn't share it last week, but we tried to teach our boys this, and we taught them to earn money. They did pretty good at that. Of course, they were young. They didn't know any different, so they just believed this. And they earned money, and they were happy. But then we'd go to give them their dollar that they had earned, and we'd give it to them in change. You know why we gave it to them in change? Because there's something else coming, isn't there? And we're like, boys, this is God's principle for money. This first dime goes to God. You can put it in the offering plate on Sunday. This second dime goes in your piggy bank, and you can't touch it till you're like 18 or 21. And you get 80%. And you know what our boys did? That's not fair. Why isn't it fair? Because I earned $1. You told me I was going to earn $1. Yes, I did. I didn't lie to you. You earned $1. But God has a plan for his money. It's really God's money. God asked for a little bit back. He asked you to be prepared and put some away, and then learn to be disciplined and live on rest. It was a hard lesson for a long time. It's a hard lesson for us today, isn't it? We still struggle with it as adults. But learning to live on less is one of the ways God disciplines us. And God says he only disciplines who? Those that he loves. Because punishment incurs pain and hurt. Discipline corrects us and puts us on the right path. So the boys had to learn that if they wanted something bigger, they just had to work for it and earn more. They still gave God their money, and they also realized that it's fun to save as you watch that piggy bank begin to grow, and it's fun to be generous with your money too. Today we get to probably a sermon you've never heard in church. Spend your money. Here, hold her down. Don't let her get too excited yet. She's already looking up infomercials on her phone now, like, oh yeah.
She's on Amazon.
She's on Amazon already, yeah. Hey, cool people that bought this item also bought these 12 items. Buy them now, right? All you do is need one click and we'll finance you. Hey, you want to try Amazon Prime? Yeah, I've seen it too. I've been tempted as well. I looked up the top 10 infomercials over the last years. I'm going to share some stuff. Now, I'll admit, not all of these things are bad. In fact, some of them are still in circulation and some are good. But see if you were ever tempted to buy one of these. See if you actually own one of these top 10 infomercial items. Number one, I'm sure you'll guess this with me. Remember the old boxer? Became marketing manager. Sold a cool little George Foreman grill. I saw them. They're still on sale at Walmart. There's no more infomercials, but you can buy more. George Foreman grills are the #1 infomercial seller that there is. Fortunately, it's a halfway decent product, right? You know what the second one was? Back in the kitchen. Want your smoothies? Want to blend things? The magic bullet. That's right. The magic bullet. Any of you ever cleaned anything and you had the show-wham? Remember the show-wham? Oh yeah. And my favorite, as I mentioned earlier, you want that little onesie for the family photo at night? The Snuggie, right? Gives me images of something else. I think of the wedgie, and it's not the same thing. But then there was the ped egg to, do your stuff. And then you remember this one? This was back in the 80s when the fitness scene was going on. The Total Home Gym. Remember that? Here's my favorite, which I admit I almost bought one of these. Almost bought one for the church at one time, but I'm so glad I didn't. Remember this? On, off. What is it?
The clapper.
The clapper. That's Kara's got 3 of them at her house. She closes the door and then there's one light, like a strobe light going on and off. No, she doesn't. I'm just kidding. And then there was the famous 80s other workout machine, the Bowflex. Remember that? No more heavy weights, just hook up these little straps together, the Bowflex, and they're still selling too. And my favorite, another favorite was Susan Summers. I had the poster, I didn't have the unit. Remember Polly? The Thigh Master. Come on, ladies. You can't see this on here, and I'm glad you can't. I mean, you could be in church working on your thighs, lady, right now, right? The Thigh Master. And then, of course, with each Thigh Master that you bought on this infomercial, if you paid an extra $5, you could get a free set of Ginsu knives, right? The one that didn't make the list of the top 10 that I actually wish I had was the Pocket Fisherman.
He had one.
Yeah, okay. Did you still have it?
No.
I'll buy it from you. I wish I had a Pocket Fisherman. I just thought they were so cool. Remember that? You know, you fold it, it sits about this big. You fold it, there's a little compartment, and your bobbers and everything fit in there, and you could go out this little thing this big and fish, right? Did it work? Yeah, that's why I wanted one, right? Those are infomercials, and people spend millions of dollars on those. I used to know some folk, actually I still know them, but there was a family that I knew here a couple years ago, and they thought they would invest for their future. And they ended up squandering their money. They thought they were watching QVC, and they bought into the infomercial with precious jewels from QVC. I remember we went to camp one year and they came with us, and they had like fishing boxes. You know those little fishing boxes you have, the little squares, and you've got like 36 compartments in one. They had like 5 or 6 fishing boxes full of these jewels, which they said, we're going to save these for retirement. We're going to invest every time we get some money, and we're going to buy these off of QVC, and we're going to invest, and we're going to have these jewels for our retirement because they've told us they'll be worth so much. And then the day came. They took their very cherished years worth of work of jewels from QVC to a jeweler. And you know what he told them? They're worthless, they're rocks. And they're like, what do you mean? He goes, they are jewels legitimately, rubies and sapphires and stuff, but he goes, they're not even gemstone grade. We can't even put those in a setting, they are such a low grade. And there they were, 5 or 6 boxes of gems representing thousands and thousands of dollars they invested for the years in hope that QVC was right. We've done stuff like that too, haven't we? We've bought stuff we don't need. Anybody ever buy something that you were just convinced you needed, and then a few days later you ended up with this thing called buyer's remorse? Which is a regret of like, why did I buy this? I mean, suddenly the eureka light goes off, like I didn't need it, I bought it, I spent a lot of money on it, and now what am I going to do with it, right? The Bible calls us and gives us permission to spend God's money. Why do I say spend God's money? Because biblically, everything we have comes from who? From God. The home we live in, somehow God's provided. The finances we have coming in for life, for retirement of kids, God has somehow provided in some way, shape, or form. As Christians, we need to get away from the context that we have earned the money we have and have the possessions we have. God has allowed that to be provided. And here's the cool thing about God. We hear about free will, right? Not free will, don't get confused with the bumper sticker, right? Free will means you have the right to choose. God gives you the right to choose. In fact, He came to save all through Jesus, right? But He gives us the right to choose Him or reject Him. With some of the finances and resources that God gives us, He also gives us the free will to choose how we spend His money. Now, He calls us to spend it wisely. That's the whole theme for today, is to spend our money wisely and not squander it. But He gives us the freedom, and He'll allow us to buy some bonehead things to learn lessons. Don't they teach us things? I mean, sometimes I've had to explain to Christy over our young married life, we didn't have money. I bought something I thought was really cool, and she's like, how much did you spend on that? What do we do with it? You know, we could have used the money here. And I'm like, yeah, but at the moment it looks so cool. I needed it. And now I have it. Now nobody wants to buy it, and I can't get rid of it. True confessions. Early in our marriage, we took this little trip over to Colorado, and we went through Wyoming. At that time, there was something illegal in Utah that was legal in Wyoming. You know what it was?
Scratch offs.
Scratch off? No, I wasn't there yet. It wasn't alcohol.
Fireworks.
Fireworks, yeah. We're traveling through fireworks. We're newly married. We don't have a lot of money. We hit the fireworks stand and had this beautiful sign up: buy one, get one free, right? And I'm there and I buy a bunch for me. I'm loading up our car on vacation in the heat with fireworks in the back of the car with free with the glass window, which is not a good idea. But then I look at it, we're going to Colorado, we're going to see my family. I'm like, oh, my brother would love some of this. So in good faith, I brought like $200 worth of fireworks for my brother, of which I showed up and he's like, I don't want that. Guess what I had for the next couple of years? $200 worth of illegal fireworks that I couldn't use, right? Because my brother wouldn't buy them. I'm like, dude, we used to play with these when we were little in Colorado. You'd have so much fun. You'll blow up a little army men with the M80s and stuff. He's like, I'm kind of past that, you know? I squandered it. Then I had to live with it. I had buyer's remorse. God calls us to earn our money, to keep our honor, to save some, to give some back. But he also allows us and says, it's okay for you to spend money within boundaries. God always gives us boundaries. My imagery of a boundary is this. When I was young, I've shared with you, my grandparents kind of raised us, and there was a short time where they couldn't accommodate us, so my mom kind of had us go to a gal every day while she was at work. And this gal had a big open area in her yard, and she had a pit bull. Maybe it was, I don't know, pit bull, but it was a bulldog. She had a bulldog, and this bulldog was on this long 15-foot chain. And I noticed as a young 8, 9-year-old boy that there was a circle around where this chain could reach. And I thought, well, that's odd. And everything was barren within this circle. Only the grass grew outside of the circle. And I thought as a young boy, well, that's odd. And I learned one day what the circle was for. You see, the circle was a boundary, right? You know where I'm going with this? As long as I was outside of that boundary, I was what? Safe. Well, one day, I had petted the doggie when she was there. One day she went to feed the dog and put it within about 5 feet of that boundary, and I thought it'd be a cool idea to go and pet the puppy. Don't ever feed a strange dog when they're eating, or don't ever pet a strange dog when they're eating, and you're in their boundaries. You know why? They will bite. I got in that boundary, and I went to pet him, and he's eating his food, and danger went off in his eyes, and man, he lashed out, and he bit me. Luckily, it was a warning bite. He didn't break the skin or anything. But I thought I died and went to heaven in that moment. Right? Because I was shocked. His weight when he hit me, when he jumped on me, was so much, he knocked me out of his boundary. I learned really quick that boundaries are good to keep us away from danger, to either keep us safe inside, away from danger, or to keep us outside where danger tempts us to come in. Right? Boundaries are good. So God says you can spend money, but spend it wisely. And the motivation for spending it wisely is simple. Look at the Word of God. Where were the investments in the Word of God that were good? And imitate that. What was Jesus' focus? And I'll give you a few. We're going to talk about generosity next week. That was a big one. Because he gave, he healed, he met needs. He talks about the fact that true religion is visiting widows and orphans and meeting the needs of others. He said, he who is given to the least of these has what? Given unto me. Jesus says, store up treasure where? In heaven. Jesus gives us a mindset for where we spend our money. And it's a mindset that for most of us, we have to learn throughout our lives. Now, some of you, when we got married, Christy's parents had very good financial management. Mine, so you can relate with this, was a free-for-all. When you had money, you spent it, and when you didn't, you just went without. That was the life lesson. That was it. Christy's actually had a plan. I mean, she mentioned that B word to me when we were first married, and it scared me. Remember the B word? Budget. And I have to allocate my money, and I have to live within boundaries. It's like, yeah, and it's a good thing. One of the examples we have of good godly budgeting was John Wesley. He was one of the Wesley brothers, and he went on, he and his brother, to establish, become the main preachers of what we now call the Methodist faith. And one of the things they do in their Methodism, where Methodists come from, is, they don't do it now, but back in the early days of Methodism, John and Charles Wesley would preach and teach their congregate members to work and earn God's money. He had that belief. And to save money, he had that belief. But he taught them to spend it on things that were more useful to other people. But John Wesley was not always this way in his younger years. He didn't become a spiritual giant until years later, actually after he had started ministry. John Wesley's younger years was living with his family. His father was a pastor. They were a poor pastor. In that time, his father and mother had 19 children. Ouch is right. Only a woman can say that. Men can't understand. 19 children, of which 9 died in childbirth. So they had 10 kids that lived. His father's a clergyman, obviously didn't make much money, wasn't the greatest preacher in the world, and he was thrown in prison twice because he was indebted. John Wesley writes in his memoirs that he remembers going to bed hungry night after night after night. He remembers being served a meal at dinner that his mother was saying, "You need to eat this and be thankful for it." And he's like, "Our dog wouldn't even eat that." But that's what was provided. That's what we had to eat. And Mama's saying, be thankful for what's on your plate. John Wesley had that motivation of growing up with his finances that way all his life. So he was motivated to do something more. So he sought education. He eventually got a teaching opportunity at Oxford University and at Lincoln College later in his life, where he got paid a decent wage as a college professor. But in the first part of John Wesley and his teaching career there, he basically admits he squandered his money on all things most men grow up loving. Card games, tobacco, and brandy. Card games, tobacco, and brandy. He said he spent excess amounts of his money, and he would find he would not have enough money to get by through the week. As the story goes on, and his brother's writing a story about John Wesley, he says that there was one specific time where John Wesley got paid from Oxford University, and he had a little extra, so he decided to decorate his apartment with these beautiful, expensive pictures. So before the card game with the boys and everything, he went down. He knew he'd spend the money to card games, so he went to an art shop. He bought these beautiful, expensive pictures, and he put them up in his apartment around his walls. And then there was a knock on the door just after he put them up. The knock on the door was the chambermaid. Anybody know what a chambermaid is? She was the gal that would come in, that was hired by the managers, that would clean the apartments and would take the chamber pots, you know what the chamber pots are? The potty pots, out from under the bed and stuff, and dump them for you and then bring them back clean. Say that John Wesley put up this expensive art in his apartment, and the chambermaid showed up, and it was winter. And then she asked him if he had anything, because she knew he'd worked at the university and must make good money, or decent money. He asked her if he had any money to help her because she and her family were freezing and starving. And he said he looked at her, and she had a thin shawl on and an outfit that held no cold wind out. And he reached in his pocket to gather his coins, and he had but a few pennies. He said God smacked him in the face that day as he looked around his apartment at all the expensive art he had just bought. And here he was preaching on the Bible and being a minister at Oxford University. And he'd squandered his money, and he didn't have enough money to give this chambermaid enough to help her out in her need in winter. He says he never got that mindset out. Every time he got paid, the chambermaid would appear in his mindset throughout his entire life. It was a vivid picture of spending money on who? Himself. And he says, as a preacher, teaching what God says to do with your money, he says, I missed it. I squandered it. I wasted it. What John Wesley did after that was he sat down, and at that point, he made 30 pounds a year. I don't know how much 30 pounds is, I didn't equate it, but it was English money, it was back in the 1900s, so he made 30 pounds a year. He figured out that he could basically live on 28 pounds a year. So he lived on 28 pounds that year, and he gave the rest to the poor and the needy and the church. The next year he had done so well at his teaching ministry that they doubled his salary to 60 pounds. Now, when we get a raise, what do we do with our lifestyle? We adjust, right? In fact, some of us adjust our lifestyle before we get the raise thinking it's coming, right? John Wesley did something different. He kept living on that 28 pounds, and he gave away 32 pounds away to the needy and the homeless and the homeless homes in the church that year. What John Wesley did the entire rest of his life was to live on the value of 28 pounds of money. And as through his life, he kept getting more and more as his popularity increased and as the Methodist Church began to take off, until the point that he was living on 2% of his income every year and giving away how much? 98%. Why? Because he said God kept a vivid image of that chambermaid and his apartment and that art in his mind until the day he died. Of how there were needs right out his front door, and yet he was lavishing himself with what he could buy with the new money that he had. That's a contrasting story to us, isn't it? It hits at the heart. Isaiah 55 says this, why do you spend money for what is not bread, and your wages for what does not satisfy? I picked that verse and put in the message, and I'm like, I put that there because you know why? That verse scares me. Because it hits me where I live. Why do you spend money for what is not bread, and wages for what doesn't satisfy? You know all that stuff that I bought? Except for the initial adrenaline rush of buying it, doesn't satisfy, and it just takes up room now. That's kind of the message that God is speaking to us. Where the world's vision of money and having it says, squander me, buy all the stuff, and God's money says, spend me. After what? You tithe, you give to God first fruits, and you save some, and learn to live and spend on the 80% or less. There's two ministries, we talked about this last time within the spending, because money is just a tool, a resource, right? That's really all it is. If we put it in the category of a spiritual gift, it's like something that God gives us and entrusts us to use for the reason of why. Why do we have spiritual gifts? To bless who? Others, to build up the church. Money is in that same category. We have two ministries. One ministry is to bless us, because God says He'll provide. And He teaches us to earn that money, save it, and then He says it's okay to be blessed, and then to bless others. To choose to use it wisely. That's what money is for. It's a tool, it's a resource. It's not inherently good or bad, it's a resource. And part of that is to bless us. because God wants to bless us. He wants to see us happy. So it's okay to spend money, but again, within boundaries. Matthew 6. Here's Jesus' message to us on money and our thought process about money. And many times we've used this as well, but oftentimes in church, this whole set of scripture is about anxiety. Anybody have anxiety? Any of you have medication for anxiety? Any of you have medication for your anxiety? Anxiety creates problems, right? Jesus is speaking, and we often use this about anxiety, but it's really about a money issue and about trust, because how we spend our money, the motivation reveals who we trust the most, whether it's us or God or the almighty dollar. Matthew 6, verses 25 to 34. Jesus speaking, it says this, "For this reason I say to you, do not be worried about life, as to what you'll eat or what you'll drink, nor for your body as to what you'll put on. Is not life more important than food, and the body more than clothing? Look at the birds of the air. They do not sow, nor do they reap, nor do they gather into barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them." You know what? Christy and Tara and I were talking about this the other day, and you know what we realized in our simple 60 years of 6 decades of life? We've never watched a bird and seen it worry. Eureka! Whoa, a big one, huh? Pauline's going. But I've never watched a bird. That bird's going, "Oh my gosh, what am I going to eat today? Oh my gosh!" They just flutter around and look cool and do things I can't do. I've never seen a bird worry. Have you? No. Are they not worth more? Are you not worth more than they? Verse 27. "And who of you, being worried, can add a single hour to your life? And why are you worried about clothing? Observe how the lilies of the field grow. Nor do they toil, nor do they spin. And yet I say to you that not even King Solomon was in all his glory was clothed like one of these. But if God so clothes the grass of the field, which is here today and tomorrow is thrown into the furnace, will he not much more clothe you? Here's the part that hits me. You of what? Little faith." When we worry, we are replacing faith with anxiety. Now, the first thing I say to that is, well, I don't want to do that. But then what do I turn around and do? I do it. Anybody else with me? I worry about things that are totally out of my control. I worry about other people. I worry about things, and it's like, God's like, what are you doing? Where's your faith in me? Where's your trust? You a little faith. Do not worry then, saying, what will we eat, or what shall we drink, or with what will I have clothing? For the Gentiles eagerly seek all these things. Your heavenly Father knows what you need in all of them. But seek first the kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. So do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will take care of itself. Each day has enough troubles of its own. Now that last part I totally know is true, right? But he says, seek first the kingdom and God's righteousness. Here's the precept for how we spend our money, and I'm actually going to tell you to spend some money. If you've earned it and you've given God his first fruits, if you've saved some, spend some money. It's okay. Because the opposite we talked about last week is wrong. When you're a hoarder or a miser and you keep all the money to you and don't use it to bless others, you're wasting the gift that God has given you. You're keeping it for yourself. You're misabusing the resource God has blessed you with. Hard stuff, right? But it's biblical. God says when you have your money and you tithe, you give to God, maybe do it sacrificially, you've stored some, maybe more than 10%, you've saved up, now use it to bless yourself, enjoy life, that we talk about John 10:10, have life and have it abundantly. In other words, enjoy life. It's okay to spend some money on you. Just keep it within reason. Don't spend it all on you. Some on you, but not all on you. But then use it to build up treasure in heaven. And how do you build up treasure in heaven? God says when you've done it, to who? The least of these, to those have-nots, to those without, to those who don't have what you have, you've done it unto me, and you're building treasure in heaven. God says when you're meeting needs, that's where I want you to spend your money. It's okay to spend some on you. You're going to hear me say that, and I'm not going to back down from it. But God says, I've also given you resources to meet the needs of others. To meet the needs of others. Do you know it's a financial fact that we have enough resources in our world to literally wipe out this thing called world hunger? It's a proven fact. We can wipe out world hunger. In fact, we can wipe out poverty. Hear all these things saying, please send money, we need money to help wipe out poverty. We can do it, but you know what we have to do? Everybody in the world has to share with everybody else. When you're Elon Musk and you're the first trillionaire and you don't want to share, there's 1 million people in Africa starving. And you're buying a new jet. For you, to look cool. Because you can. What a waste. I am not rich in what I think rich is compared to the rest of the world. I'm rich. But in my American mindset, I'm not rich. But I would not want to stand before God on Judgment Day. And God says, John, what'd you do with the resources, the wealth, the money, the stuff I gave you? I bought a jet. $6 million jet. Wow. Let me show you a picture of who died in Africa because you bought a jet. You could have saved them. You could have sent food. I don't want to be that guy. I mean, I have enough issues of my own when I put it in that picture of standing before Jesus and explaining the money I squandered. I have enough at this level. I don't need more. And there are times where the American culture wants to be rich in our mindset, and I'm like, thank you, Lord, I'm not rich. I don't want to have that responsibility. Because when we're entrusted with much, what is expected? Much back. God does it on an even level. But for those of you that still want to be with the mindset of the world and have more, and keep it for yourself, let me remind you of this. Here is what the rest of the world really is when you take the candy coating off. When you strip that off and you see what's really inside, the average American household, current, excluding a mortgage or rent, excluding a car, the average culmination of them all is in debt $105,000 to $110,000 right now. Average. Which means there's some that are way more than that. For the single person, the average debt is $60,000 to $70,000 beyond car and beyond place to live. Now, for the students coming out of college with the extreme college fees and student loans, the average student leaves college in debt $35,000 to $40,000. That's a massive amount of money to start life off with, isn't it? For grins and giggles, I looked up, on average, the average Christian across the United States tithes 2% of their income. 2. Average. And then you know what they do? They spend 4 or 5% on lunch. Who's the real priority? They are. And God says there's a better way. I want you to realize that if you've earned your money and you've tithed and you've saved, it's good. Now you can enjoy it, but enjoy it, have the right motivation to build up treasure in heaven, to use it for what it was meant for, to realize it's not all for you, it's to bless you, to do ministry to you, but also to bless others. Those of you that have taken financial peace, Dave Ramsey says this at the beginning of the first session, and he repeats it through every session. He says, live like no one else now. In other words, give to God, save money, get out of debt. Live like no one else now, because the American population lives in debt constantly, so that later you can what? You can give and live like nobody else. I shared with you last week that in all the financial counselors that Christy and I have talked to in the last 3 years, When you've saved all your life, you get a certain point with your pension, your 401k, and your IRA, whatever money you put away in your savings account, they say you hit a certain point in a certain age, you should spend some money. You've saved it all life. Don't keep that same mindset. You got to keep saving it, never using it. Now your life has changed. Your life is on the downward end. Spend some money and enjoy it. And spend it on others. Give it to charities that can't have it and need it. So 4 things about how to spend your money. First, resist comparing yourself to others. Do you ever notice that there's always someone that has something better than you? And when you get something new, someone else walks in with a newer one and a better one, right? Growing up in the 50s and 60s, it was called keeping up with the Joneses, the white picket fence, the little house, the 3.2 children and that one dog, right? You know, the turkey for family dinner. Wasn't it Eisenhower that promised a chicken in every pot? You know, things are going to be good after this recession and war. Quit comparing yourself to others. As I shared with you, if you want to compare yourself with others, here's the reality of others underneath the candy coating. Average marriage debt, $105,000 to $110,000 beyond where they live in their house. Single debt, $60,000 to $70,000. Do you want to be average? Do you want to be like everybody else? In debt? No. Here's the other side of the coin if you want to still compare yourself. By world standards, you and I are filthy rich. We spend more in a month than most people making more than a year. The average income right now throughout the world, again, this is average, meaning there's some, a lot that make more, but a lot more that make less. The average income across our world today is $3,000 to $5,000 a year. You want to compare yourself to somebody, compare yourself to the rest of the world with your income. It will mess your mind up. And it will change how you think and how you spend. Don't compare yourself to Americans, 1, because they're all in debt, but 2, compare yourself to the rest of the world and realize that we, even in our poverty, are rich. Do you know an average panhandler in California makes an average of free handouts of $60,000 a year? They're not going without too bad. Right? And that doesn't include the free food and clothing they get, the homeless shelters. That's just cold cash they don't pay taxes on. First rule of money, don't compare yourself to others. If you do it on a global basis. And realize you are wealthy beyond your means. God says, what are you going to do with my stuff that I loaned you? Second, here's a hard one for Americans. Rejoice. First, with that word rejoice, the Bible has another verse that says, how often should you rejoice? Nobody wants to say because we're going to be held accountable, right? Rejoice always. And then again, I say rejoice. In other words, cut the negative talk out of your mouth, right? Cut it out, get rid of it. Rejoice, and again I say rejoice always, but rejoice in what you have. Rejoice in what God has already given you. In other words, learn to be content with what you've got. Do you have enough stuff right now in your life to last you the rest of your life? How many of you have more than enough stuff? Yeah, Christy and I were talking about retirement and all that good stuff, which you can give us some advice on. But I looked up top 12 things you should do before you retire. I didn't like the article. You know, like number 3 or number 4 was? After saving and having money put aside. You know what number 3 or number 4 was? It's a D word. Hit me right here in the head. Declutter. But I've been saving this for 6 decades. You know what I've realized with her mother and everything, what we'll face when her mother passes away stuff? The kids don't want my stuff. They don't want to have to deal with getting rid of my stuff. Declutter was the top thing on the list, and I'm going, oh my gosh. Learning to live with less, but it's a good thing. It's a good thing. Be content with what you already have. Because when you're content with what you have, you know what you don't feel a need for? More, a newer, a shinier, a better. And you take care of what you have because it's good. And you're a good steward. Be content with what you have. In fact, 1 Timothy 6:6 tells us this. But godliness, which we should have godliness, right, as Christians, is actually of great means when accompanied with what? Contentment. When we are more than pleased and happy with what God's given us, and we're faithful, Timothy the preacher says it's good. In fact, it's really good. You know why? Because it frees us from temptation. It frees us from the bondage of stuff. Any of you have the bondage of stuff? Clutter? We're experiencing it right now. And it's like, why did we do this to ourselves? Kids don't want it, and now we don't use it. What are we going to do with it? Third thing is this. Return always to give the first fruits back to God. Do you know why God calls you to give the first, your paycheck, whatever that form's in, back to God? Why the reason is? So you trust Him more than you trust yourself and above everything else. I struggled with tithing as a young Christian, as a young youth minister. I finally got it, and I've never looked back. It's a good thing. I can personally tell you, when I learned the tithe, I truly saw how God provided, and I missed it before then. Because I always thought, there's never enough to give to God. If I give God 10% of my, when I started my first job was $16,000 a year, woohoo! Still wasn't much then. We lived on the wrong side of the tracks. The people at the church that hired us said we lived on the wrong side of town. I'm like, okay, it's more. We'll live on the right side, right? To give God the first. You know what that meant for me as a selfish person? There won't be enough left. When? At the end. And I struggled with it. Finally we did it. I didn't do it in a good way, but I did it. And God taught me a tremendous lesson. He says, God, John, you depend upon me to provide. I am your Jehovah Jireh provider. I will provide, not you. I'll make it happen. I've told you the story a little bit, but it freaked me out. Just told Christy in a very non-loving, angry way, just write the check. Right? And then I go to church and be happy. And then God taught me. Amazingly, we wrote that check, and I'm like, there's not enough money to meet the end of the month anyway. What are we going to do now? You know what happened? That first time we wrote an actual tithe check, there's money. There's $25 left over. And I'm like, well, that's odd. That's funky math. That's God's math. So we put it in savings bonds to save, because God said save. I'm like, well, they worked the first time. We ought to do it the second time. Savings bonds aren't a good savings thing, by the way, but we saved money. We did what God said, and God blessed us. Give God the first fruits and trust Him for the rest. And finally, the last thing is this. Fourth thing, refocus your mindset on money, on spending. Refocus this. With the stuff and the money you have, hold on to it with an open hand. You know what that means? Don't be selfish. Don't keep it all for you. Hold on to an open hand with the Lord giveth, the Lord taketh away. And I'm going to change that a little bit. The Lord giveth, and the Lord uses to meet needs. The Lord uses to bless others. I'll close with this. Anybody ever see the movie Schindler's List when it came out a few years ago? Shocking movie about the World War. Sad thing is they don't even teach about the Holocaust in most schools now. Horrible war. Horrible what Nazi Germany did to the Jews. Horrible. Schindler's List is a story about one man, Oskar Schindler, who was a greedy man. He was a businessman, and he was a very good one. Oskar Schindler was not a Jew, but he joined the Nazi Party. He had several companies. He joined the Nazi Party, and you know why? Not for national pride or anything like that, but to make money. because he turned his companies into ammunition manufacturing companies. You know what you need when you fight a war? Bullets, right? He made bukus of money off of selling ammunition to the Germans. He became filthy rich. He hung out in the elite of the German crowd. But then he had a conviction with what he saw was happening to the Jews. They would be rounded up just because they were Jewish, hauled off the concentration camps, and by the hundreds and thousands going in right off the train into a room where they were supposed to take a shower and clean up, and it was what? A gas chamber to kill them. Thousands upon thousands. He realized this, and he said, I can't stand this. I can't see this go on. Because he had Jewish people working for him in his factory, and he heard their stories, and it convicted him. So Oskar Schindler played the wealthy rich guy with the Nazis to keep the money flowing, but then what he would do with his profits is he would take the profits and he would help to smuggle the Jewish people to safety so that they would not go to the concentration camps and the gas chambers. By the end of the war, Oskar Schindler's list was a list of 1,100 Jewish people that didn't go to the gas chamber from the profits of his money. But the closing scene of that movie wrecks me every time. Because in the closing scene, he's looking at the list his bookkeeper gave him of 1,100 Jews that didn't go to the gas chamber because he financed getting them to safety. And he looks around and he pulls up his fancy engraved lighter for a cigarette. And he's crying. He says, this could have saved one Jew. He picks up his wine goblet and he says, this was a life. It could have saved one more. And he begins picking up the things, the rich, wealthy things in his room, and he says, this could have saved a life. And I spent it, I wasted it. The biblical mindset on spending money is, one, it's okay to spend. Kids, if you've earned money and you've put money away, you've given God what's His, spend some money. One, on ministry to yourself. Second, to bless others. The Pregnancy Resource Center, now called the Charis Center, just sent out a newsletter. And they mentioned the fact that their greatest need right now isn't money. You know what it is? It's home goods. Because as they take these young pregnant women in and they convince them to not have an abortion, their families a lot of times alienate them. And these women have to go out and they set them up in an apartment, but they have no furnishings, they have no kitchen goods, they have nothing. Their greatest need is the stuff that we have sitting in our house, collecting dust. What we have that collects dust can bless a young woman to survive. It's good to have money. God says have money. God says it's for ministry. Use some for you, but share some and meet the needs. And realize that that stuff you and I have could save a life. Amen? Let's pray. Father in heaven, we thank you so much. God, every once in a while, we just thank you for a spiritual punch in the gut. To remind us of what's important, to remind us of what's yours, to remind us of how undeserving we are, and yet you care for us. Better than the lilies of the field, or the birds of the air. You clothe us, you feed us, you protect us, you provide for us. And Lord, compared to the world, we are insanely rich. God, help us to keep a rightful mindset, a rightful motivation, a biblical motivation on spending our money. That it's good to spend money. It's okay. It's biblical. But Lord, to know the reason why we're doing it. With that, help us to build up treasure in heaven, to give you glory, to someday meet the people in heaven that we have blessed without even knowing it, and hear their stories of salvation. To you be the glory forever and ever.